Welcome, everybody, to the Own Your Good podcast. I am so excited to be with you today. It's been an interesting day for me as a teacher. I don't want to get into too many details too soon, but today I'm excited to talk with Lark Galley and talk about her story and explore how the things that she's had to deal with have to do with owning your good. I will admit that when I first got the opportunity to talk to her, or at least she came to me and said, I think I could get on your podcast, I sort of stopped and thought, I don't know if this is going to work, but this is definitely a topic that needs to be addressed, and I feel like there is positivity, there is good that comes from some of the tragedies that we face. Maybe as a preface to this, I haven't really shared much on the podcast about my experience. We'll be talking about depression and suicide, and I'm sure other elements that are connected to that. And my experience with that, and my wife has given permission, like this is something that we've been through together. She recognizes that it's not a character flaw of hers, that there's nothing to be sorry about. It is a part of life and what she's had to deal with. So when we were first married, my wife experienced a sudden surge of emotions and feelings about depression and bipolar. And so the first 10 years of our marriage was not fun. And the experience part of that experience included some emergency room visits to have her stomach pumped, not for an intentional attempt at suicide, but just the feeling of wanting to sleep for a really long time. And so for a long time, for a lot of my adult life, I've had these feelings of insecurity and fear and not sure how to deal with this. And today in school, and again, no too many personal information details or things, but I had a student who I could tell was struggling. She had tears in her eyes. And one of my policies in my class is to, if you need a drink, if you need to go take a break, if you need to go take a walk because of something that you're going through, that is okay. I don't need to know the details. And if you need something, I'm always here to talk, because I know that students, whether it's because of parents or other people or whatever, they can feel trapped. And anyway, so long story short, she went for a walk and didn't come back, ended up in the hospital. And so I'll be emotional because it really hurts to be a person who cares about people and see other people hurting and not know what to do or not be able to do anything. And I recognize I'm not a medical professional in psychology or in medicine, and it's not my job to be that savior kind of person. But this is a topic that is really important to me, and I might have to pause and cut some things out. So, Lark Galley, welcome. I am so glad that you're here with me today.
Thanks, David. And I appreciate your willingness to address a very hard topic. But as you mentioned, it's very prevalent. And suicide is the number one killer of our youth in Utah. It's the number two killer nationwide. And I tell people, if you haven't been affected by it yet, you will be.
Yeah, it's totally true. So I've sort of introduced my feelings and my experience on this topic, and I'm sure I'll have more to say about this. Go ahead and introduce who you are, where you have come from to put you on this path of the book that you've written and the people that you're trying to reach.
I would love to. So if you had told me 20 months ago, Lark, you're going to be speaking about suicide, and you're going to get to share all of the deep, darkest secrets about your growing up and your father's undiagnosed mental illness and his suicide and your son's suicide, I would have said, no way. Never going to happen.
Yeah.
Because we know the shame and the stigma associated with suicide, right?
Yeah.
And when my father died by suicide, it will be 7 years ago, this coming January 2021, I couldn't talk about it. My best friends didn't know that he died by suicide.
Yeah.
I went into a 5-month dark depression. I didn't even know I was in a depression. All I remember is that I would go to meetings, I would take notes, and 2 days later, I would look at those notes and I would say, that's my handwriting, but I don't remember being in the meeting, and I don't remember what I'm supposed to do with this information.
Wow.
And, for someone who's, I consider myself intelligent, professional, and all of this, to experience this kind of what's called professional grief, where you just can't even deal with things, that was very traumatic. Fast forward just over 5 years from that date, and my 19-year-old son, he's a freshman at the University of Utah, and things just happened that compounded all at once. It became too much for him, and out of the blue, in our opinion, he just took his life.
Yeah.
And that has been devastating to our family. And I started to go down to that dark hole, that depression where I was with my father.
Yeah.
And I had 3 mothers reach out to me, and they had teenage children who knew my son, and they expressed their concerns about the struggles their children were having. And if you're familiar with copycat suicide, which is very prevalent, especially amongst the youth, I realized that I did not have the luxury of going into a depression. And that while I couldn't control whether or not these children took their lives, I could control whether or not I talked about it. And so very soon after my son died, I started going out and posting on social media and explaining the things that I was feeling and the information I had found and ways that we might be able to take away the shame and stigma so that we can talk about this. My goal was to prevent one other parent from having to experience what I had gone through.
Yeah. So just to sort of encapsulate what I'm hearing, everything seemed to be fine. I mean, did you know about your dad's experiences growing up? Was that obvious to you then?
As a child, it was not. All I knew was that, I had a very unstable childhood. We moved every year. I went to a different school every year of my life.
Yeah.
And it had a lot to do with my father just, always running from his demons, trying to find the next adventure. As a child, it was more of an adventure than anything else because of the way my father portrayed it. And he was either up or down. Yeah. And when you're younger, I mean, this was, 50 years ago, they didn't really talk about this. They didn't know what this was.
Yeah, definitely.
And it wasn't until about 25 years ago that my father was actually diagnosed with bipolar. And then it was very obvious, as you look back, very obvious. And he had struggled with depression. He would take medication. Sometimes it would work, sometimes it wouldn't work. And he was always struggling. The fact that he died by suicide really didn't surprise me. And yet when it finally came, it still hurt. And it was very hard. Wow.
So as an adult now, looking back, a lot of those experiences sort of aha moments like that makes sense. And I know that parents, we're worried about our kids. We know that they have down days. We know that they have up days. And there's a lot of talk in education and in parenting groups. Here are the signs that you need to watch for. Do you feel like you had any insight to that because of your experience with your dad?
You know what? With my dad, it was fairly obvious. With my son, it was not.
Yeah.
And I had always tried to, because of my father's mental illness, which he inherited from his mother, who she inherited from her mother. I had several aunts and uncles who struggled with mental illness. I have several cousins and siblings who struggle. I was really attentive, and I thought I was doing a good job watching for those signs. One sign that I did miss, I didn't really see it in any of my kids, other than that I would kind of joke that, oh, the boy seems more sensitive than the girls. Isn't that funny?
Yeah.
Well, it's not so funny now, right?
Yeah.
Because in retrospect, it's the ones who are more sensitive that take on the emotions and these feelings of those around them, which then make it so much more difficult for them to cope and deal with what they have to deal with.
Yeah. So this isn't necessarily a blanket statement that if your boy is extra emotional, that means, but it could be a sign, and to have a conversation about it.
Boys or girls,
right.
The ones that are a little bit more moved, these are the ones that are more compassionate, more tender.
Yeah.
And often the reason that they're that way is that they are hurting themselves. And so they can empathize with people in pain.
Yeah. They know how it feels, so they know how to support or to encourage or whatever. That's interesting. So I don't want to get into the details of your dad or your son's experience, but as a parent, and I know that we experience this in phases. As a young parent, we know that we don't know everything as we realize what it is to lose sleep or sacrifice for food or whatever, right? As we grow up through parenthood, we worry about the things that our kids are going to have to deal with as they graduate from elementary school to junior high or middle school to high school, and then moving into college. And we hope that by that time that they have figured out those tools. We hope that they've figured out how to be strong for themselves and ask for help when they do need it. So parents who are listening to this, wherever they are in the stage of child development, there are so many things that we worry about. There are gender identity issues, there's bullying, there's substance abuse, there are so many things. Was there anything that your son had experienced that, I guess because I'm thinking about this with my wife's experience and our own children, maybe we're extra sensitive to that.
Yes. Then increases the chances of another family member dying by suicide. It increases the chances by 50%, which, I didn't even realize this. Even though my father had issues, I did not think to, investigate this with my son.
Yeah.
And that's a huge regret.
Yeah.
So, looking back, I would say as a parent, these issues that show up as being, suicide ideation, they can often feel like just regular teenage years, right?
Yeah. Oh yeah, for sure.
Surly teens, right?
Yep.
So something that as a parent we might want to try is asking them when they come home from school, instead of the very usual question, how was your day?
Yeah.
Which kids will answer the same every time.
Yeah.
It's fine. And it might be and it might not be, but we're not going to know the truth. So how about tell me the best thing that happened to you today?
Yeah.
Let them talk about it. And then what was the worst thing that happened to you today? And let them talk about it. Because what I have found is that if we as humans are allowed to feel, we can feel the ups and the downs versus emotionally flatlining. Because when we emotionally flatline, it's not going to be too long until we physically flatline because
wow,
disconnected from the world.
Yeah. That's a powerful comparison and connection there. And I know that a lot of us feel that way. And I don't know if it's just because we have been in so much social isolation with COVID-19 and it's December now and the things that are going on. But even in regular everyday life before all this happened, when we have a bad day at work or a bad day at school, it's really nice and easy to come home and whether it's YouTube, Netflix, any kind of escape, watching a movie, whatever it is, it's really easy to do. And we need that. But sometimes I think we get into that emotional flatline, like you say, where it is so hard to deal with everything that we get there, that we go there on purpose. And it's hard to feel how we feel and admit that there is something wrong.
Exactly. And you know what? I would say that whatever we do, everyone is addicted to something, whether it's alcoholism or pornography, or maybe it's binge watching movies or disconnecting in some way. And if we find that we're doing our, addiction of choice, whatever it is, let's question it. Let's confront it and say, what am I avoiding? Because if we can face reality, and I know for me in the beginning, since the first months of my son's death, those thoughts and those questions, what if he didn't die? And it's very easy to spiral into the dark hole and have those regrets come up. Yeah. I had to catch myself and be very conscientious and say, I don't live in a world where I can rewind and go back before his death. The reality is he died. Yeah. That's the reality. And I had to do that. It's very harsh, but that was my therapy to myself to say, snap out of it. I can't change the past. Yeah. What can I do though? I can change the future, and I can use this experience to make a difference in the lives of other people. And I think that's how I felt this went along with your podcast, because even in the sad, we can find a reason to go on if we're willing to look for it.
That's So true and so tough to believe when you've had a rough day.
And that's why I say it goes back to your thoughts. And instead of allowing your thoughts to pull you down, you have to catch it right at the beginning.
Yeah.
Because I noticed that pattern. I would start to spiral down from that very first thought. It's easy to let those negative thoughts pull you down.
Yeah.
Easy up front, but harder later.
Yeah.
And so I chose to deal with hard now so that I could have it easier later by finding joy in doing something meaningful.
Yeah. So I can see the perfect segue into what you have produced and what your goal is and where you're going, and I'm excited to go there. I just want to make sure that people know that we both understand what it is to not want to get out of bed. We both know exactly what it feels like that nobody's there for you. And whether you believe in God or not, we both know what it feels like to feel like nobody's there, including God.
Exactly. You know, at times you feel very alone, and it's relying on the foundation you've built in your past, those things that you hold most dear to you, and knowing that these hard emotions can pass if we just hold on.
Yeah. And that's difficult because sometimes we know I've got other kids. I have a spouse. I have things that I need to do. I have responsibilities. I need to be there, but I can't. And so you bring up here's the transition. The great thing that we need to adjust our thinking, fix our focus to doing something that can help pull us out. And sometimes that is not necessarily, metaphorically, slapping yourself in the face and saying, I've got to fix dinner. I really don't want to, but I have people who are depending on me, and knowing that you still have value for somebody else. Other people still need you.
You know, and here's the thing that I've allowed myself is on the days that it's hard, I've allowed myself grace. And I'm fairly task oriented, get it done. And on those hard days, I might have 20 things that I would like to do, and 3 of them might get done.
Yeah.
And I will say, you know what? Good for you.
Yeah.
Whereas in the past, I might have beaten myself up for that. And now I just say, whatever kind of day it is, whatever emotions show up, I'm going to honor that and just say, I'm still here. I'm still in the game.
Yeah.
Even if I'm playing at 1%, I'm still in the game.
Yeah. Because your well-being really is just as important as everybody else. You being there for other people, whether that's today or 3 months from now, you are important. You matter just as much as anybody else. So go ahead.
And I was just going to mention along those lines, I have had 3 mentors over the past years. Each one of those in their earlier days of their career actually planned out their suicide.
Wow.
And for whatever reason, they were able to pop out of it and continue on and progress because they were a dark place at that time.
Yeah.
Years later, when I needed them, they were there for me. And I can't help but think if they had taken their lives back when that day was especially hard, when I needed them, they would not have been there.
Yeah.
And so I tell people, you know what, it might be hard today, but you don't know who needs you down the road.
Yeah.
And we need to stay in that game and share our message, because the message that you have matters. It will make a difference in people's lives.
Yeah. And I think, I don't know if there's any research on this. I haven't really looked, but I feel like those that have what seems like excessive creativity, whether they're painting, whether they're musicians, whatever it is that they are really good at expressing emotion through, right? They have some connection to this darkness. They understand. And it's like you said, they have this understanding and compassion for people who feel that. And somehow they are able to express those emotions through their art, whether it's music or painting or whatever. What was the first thing that you because part of the purpose of this podcast is creativity, that we can kind of get ourselves out of a funk, out of a bad situation by doing something creative. And that's not universal. That's not for everybody. But at what point did you realize that you had a message to share, and how did that message evolve? How did it become the book and your speaking and things?
So I call it divine inspiration. And I said, I am not a therapist. I'm not a doctor. I'm not a counselor, a psychiatrist. I'm none of those.
Yeah.
I am just a concerned parent. And I will do whatever my higher power tells me to do. And some of those do's have been a little bit scary.
Yeah.
I will do whatever I am led to do, but I need you to open doors for me.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what's happened. At first, I was impressed to be on other people's podcasts and get my message out to a broader audience. So I started doing that this past year. And as I was texting a friend over a year ago, I said, we were going back and forth about how to get on podcasts and how to do that. And she was also texting another friend at the same time. And she says, oh, you need to get your book done. And I said, but I wasn't planning to do a book. And then she said, well, I guess you are now, because that message wasn't for you. And I said, well, okay, because that really was, I didn't go into this thinking, I'm going to write a book. And the other parts about this book is that I opened the first chapter and it has to do with my childhood, which I was not planning to write about.
Yeah.
And I talked about the very unstable nature of growing up with a father who had bipolarity and all of the uncertainties that went with that as a child I didn't know. In writing that chapter, it helped me understand why I parent the way I did with my son, how I was overly organized. He accused me of being OCD.
Yeah.
Why, I had to have structure because as a child, I had no structure.
Yeah.
And it was the way that I coped with my very borderline, craziness from the family.
Yeah.
And that was my coping mechanism. And so I wrote about that. I wrote about my son's childhood and what a difficult child he was for me. Very difficult, always arguing with me, and how our relationship could have been better if I had made different parenting choices, and how I always tried to improve and learn, and how we were able to have a beautiful dinner just a couple weeks before he died. And while it wasn't perfect, our relationship was improving. And so for parents who are struggling with a strong-willed child, this book talks about how I parented before he died and how I parent now. And as parents, we cannot parent like we were parented.
Yeah.
There are way too many differences in society. As much as we want to say, well, I turned out okay, our kids are not turning out okay. They are under more pressure than we can even imagine. I think about this. Think of the most embarrassing moment for you in high school.
Yeah.
Maybe 10 people knew, right?
Yeah. It was a little bit bigger because I was in theater, but yeah.
Okay. But it was pretty devastating, right?
But yeah.
Now, if a kid in school does something embarrassing, it's 1,000 people.
Yeah.
2,000, 5,000.
Yeah.
In their mind, their life is over. Their minds aren't developed. They can't see past, hey, it's going to eventually be okay. Right. It's hard. And so think of your kids in this environment where they are struggling and they are in a battle every day just for self-preservation.
Yeah.
Let's have some compassion and let's stop being a dictator. And we are not their savior, right?
Right.
Let's come from a point where we're their advocate. We're there to support them. They can't avoid consequences. That's going to happen.
Sure.
But instead of amping out when teenagers or kids do what they're going to do, let's be more supportive instead of saying, well, this is the way our family does things.
Right.
That's not going to work anymore.
Yeah. That's a powerful insight, especially for with working with high school kids and previously in the junior high. Surprise, 14-year-olds do dumb things. As a parent, that shouldn't be a surprise. We think our kids should know better, but we should know better. They're kids.
Exactly.
Yeah. So inspiration from a friend, not from the friend, but through the friend to start writing this book. Was that therapeutic in the process of going through the causes and the stories and developing what happened and trying to think of how it could be beneficial to other people?
Yes, it was very therapeutic, but it was also very hard. And it took me much longer than I thought it would take.
Yeah.
I thought, 2 weeks, I'll pound this out, no problem. And over a year later, right? Because I would write these chapters and it was emotional and it was hard. I mean, can you imagine writing the chapter on the day your son died?
Yeah.
Having to revisit that. And being a very concise writer, I thought, okay, I don't want to revisit all these emotions. So I'll just write a paragraph that will kind of encapsulate what happened. So I finished the book. I sent it to my editor and she said, oh, no. You need to go back and you need to elaborate and you need to show dialogue and you need to have interaction.
Yeah.
And I spent 2 days of expounding those 2 days, hard days of tears.
For sure.
Of just reliving when the policeman came to tell me that my son was dead.
Yeah.
When I had to tell my daughters and my other son that their brother was dead. Coming home to a husband who was so distraught and who took the burden of my son's death upon himself.
Yeah.
Reliving all of this and going through and realizing that I had been the anchor and the strength for my family, but that also placed a really strong emotional burden on me that I hadn't realized at the time. And then coming up with these nuggets of wisdom as I reflect and say, wow, I wish I had done things differently. What would I have done differently, in the hopes of sharing this with other parents to say, wake up, this really can happen to you. Suicide is not out there. It is right in your own home, and you don't know how close it is.
Yeah. Yeah. So the situation that I experienced this morning in first period, about 8-ish in the morning, I had already anticipated giving students extra time. We're at midterms for term 2. It's December. It's COVID. It's Christmas. There are so many things that I'm sure students are dealing with, and I had already anticipated cutting some slack. But when what happened today happened with this student, I couldn't not be more compassionate. And this isn't an all about me thing. This is, I used to be the teacher that was like, this is when the assignment is due. And that's when, if you don't turn it in by that date, sorry, tough luck. That was the deadline. And, I had to reevaluate this. I had multiple mentors and advisors and administrators and things say, does it really matter if they do or don't by a specific date? Does it really matter if they get this skill or write this essay or whatever that is? And while it is important, and that's my job, and I find value in it for myself, not every student does. And I think especially right now, being sensitive to people's needs, it's really easy to see the stress, a lot easier than it has been in the past.
Yeah. Well, and suicide rates are up this year because people are feeling isolated. They are feeling this stress. The young people, especially, your high schoolers, your young adults. I mean, just imagine their whole world has been turned upside down.
Yeah.
They have no security for the future. And we as adults need to help them in their foundation and know that it will be okay. It's hard, but it will be okay. And I am here to help you get through. And I'm so glad to hear that you're being able to be more compassionate, because I too was very black and white, and it's this way or that way. And you have to consider, for your students or for your children, would you rather preserve the relationship? Would you rather have a child who is willing to come and tell you what they're dealing with, and they know that because you love them unconditionally, you're not going to lose it?
Yeah.
They've already lost it. They need somebody that's going to help them.
Yeah, for sure. So how do we show them that? We've talked a little bit about asking the right questions after school, not just how was your day, but tell me something really good that happened. Tell me something that was kind of frustrating or embarrassing, not to pull them out of it, but to show them that you're listening and that you care. How else can we show them that we really are there for them, and that regardless of what's going on right now, things will end up working out? Because as adults, we can kind of see, okay, 2020 was kind of yuck. 2021, hopefully not so much. 2022, we should have everything figured out by then. We can see that as adults, right? How do we do that for kids?
So, a few things, helping them and loving them unconditionally. And as parents, we like to say, oh, I love Johnny unconditionally. And yet, if Johnny doesn't do his chores or his room is a mess or he disappoints us in some way, how do we react?
Yeah.
And, even if it's just a scowl or turning away, how are we reacting to them? Do we see them? Can we love them right where they are, wherever they are? The other thing I would say is take an interest in what they're interested in. Several years ago, my son wanted to do rock climbing down at the gym nearby. And he needed somebody who would, that could lead climb. And his sister wasn't old enough yet to go and be certified. So he asked me to do it. And can I just tell you that at the time, I didn't feel like I had extra time for it. Going to help him lead climb, these rocks, it was not my priority.
Yeah.
But he was my priority, and trying to improve our relationship was a priority for me.
Yeah.
And so I would do that a couple times a week. We would go down there after school and I would spend an hour with him, and it was the joy of his life.
Yeah.
And so I look back on that and I have no regrets that I took the time. And I was not interested in rock climbing, but I was interested in my son.
Yeah. And that definitely gives them the opportunity to see that you really are willing to be there to listen. You really are there to be willing to help them whenever things are hard. And it's not a judgment. It's a legitimate care.
Mm-hmm. And
with enough of those, they see that you do.
Exactly. And this is something where you have to put in a lot of effort up front, and you have to start young. If you're not willing to put the time in when they're a 2-year-old, it's going to be a lot harder to get that 14-year-old to open up to you.
Yeah. That makes me think. So somebody discovers this episode or your book, and they feel like I do with some of my kids, my own. Oh no, they're 14 or 17 years old. And I know that I am, I think, a typical dad, demanding, expect, respect, get this done. And I try to show appreciation and concern and love and things. But as a parent who might feel like, oh, the boat sailed, whoops, what can I do with my 14-year-old now? Do you think they are, and obviously they're still kids, but do you think they're mature enough for you to have a conversation and say, hey, look, I know that this is how I've been as a parent, and that is kind of who I am, but I'm trying to fix that. Do you think they can handle that conversation?
Absolutely. And I would say even younger, and you want to parent per maturity, not necessarily per age, because those things are not necessarily correlated, right? So the talk that I had with my son 2 weeks before, and I had individual conversations with each of my children because I had been learning about this unconditional love. And let me tell you, as a parent, it is not easy to go to your child and say, let's go have a talk, and I want to hear from you all the things that I did wrong.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I am not doing it to defend myself or, to justify. I just said, tell me some things where you feel that I can be doing better. Tell me about our home rules and give me your feedback on that. What do you like that mom and dad are doing, and what do you not like? And we got some good feedback.
Yeah.
I quote, good feedback, right? Some hard feedback. But it allowed us to look at family rules, which were very black and white, and say, okay, let's allow them to make their own choices about certain things.
Yeah.
And some of those choices were not what we would have chosen for them.
Yeah.
But we needed to see them for who they were and allow them to have their choice.
Yeah. So depending on how mature they are, have a conversation about you trying to improve, and even asking them, give me one. And maybe even giving them some time to think about it.
Yes.
Here's the whiteboard.
They probably don't have to think too long, though. Unfortunately.
That's true. But give them the opportunity to develop that, to think about it, and not pressure, because that's one thing I've learned as an educator. If you throw the question at them on the spot, snake brain happens and they're just like,
Exactly.
But that's awesome. to give them an opportunity to give you legitimate feedback, and you have to be in love enough with your kids to accept it, whatever that is.
Exactly.
Yeah. That is so good. It's a long process. However old your kids are, whatever they're going through, whatever they need, you being willing to spend time and help them and be there for them and do things with them that they love, not necessarily that you love, they can tell. That's what it's all about.
Exactly. And with the changing in times, if we can support them, maybe one of our children does not want to take the traditional go to college, get a degree, do this, do that. Jobs and careers and future is changing so rapidly. We don't even know where our kids are going to be working in 5 to 10 years, right?
Yeah.
And so allow them their path, even if it's not the path you think they should take.
Yeah. Because success is totally relative, and success is not tied to money, and success is not tied to where you live and what your house looks like. Success is happiness, and I think we understand that the older we get, right?
Exactly. I look back on my life and I think I worked so hard in my 20s and 30s for stuff, which then owned me in my 40s and 50s, right? And now with my son's passing, stuff means nothing to me.
Yeah.
And it's not important.
And hopefully we can help people not experience that.
Right.
Hopefully we can help them to see what the good is that is in front of them. That is great.
Exactly.
So you have this book that was probably a nightmare to write. I mean, cathartic, positive experiences, the development, the going through it. How has the reception been on that?
It's been amazing. It's been beautiful, both from people I know and for people I don't know. Yeah. And they've told me, parents have said, thank you. I'm going to change the way that I parent my child. Or other people who have lost a child, they have been able to identify with going through grief and being able to find a way to move forward. And then people, I had a 25-year-old read it. She's not suffered with any mental illness in her family. Mm-hmm. She's not a parent yet. And yet she said there were so many nuggets in there that she took and will help her in her life, that she found it very beneficial. And several of my son's friends have felt that it was beneficial for them to see this story. Yeah. So I hope that it touches people and helps open the conversation for parents to have with their children, for children to see that their actions have consequences. And if they take their lives, the family that they leave behind is devastated. Yeah. Every single one of us was completely devastated.
Yeah. Yeah. What hope have you found on this journey? Because like you say, you can't go back in time. You can only have an impact on the future. Everybody's belief is totally different in what life is like in the afterlife and such. What are you looking forward to regarding that? I'm not even sure what your what your affiliation is there, what you believe in things, and so maybe that's not an appropriate question. We'll have to cut it. But
no, it's absolutely. But
I think a lot of people. Yeah, go ahead.
Wonder. Yeah. So before my son's death, I was very frustrated with him, and we had improved our relationship, but it was still a fairly frustrating one for both parties. Yeah. And I will tell you that since my son's passing, I have come closer to him. I feel him working with me to bring this message out to the world, for his words to tell people, please choose something else. I regret my choice, and please don't do what I did. And he wants me to share this message with people so very badly, and I feel him so close. And I believe that when I leave this earth, that I will be with him again, and we will embrace, and we will finally be able to have some resolution on all of these difficult times we had earlier. And we will see that we were brought together to help each other. I believe he has helped me on my journey to be a better person. Because of my son, I am more compassionate. I am kinder. I am more empathetic and understanding, more than I ever would have been without this experience.
That's a heavy lesson at a high cost.
It is. And I'm fortunate that I learned the lesson, though.
Yeah. Yeah. Wow. That is miraculous. I don't know if there's very many things that, like the negativity and the pain and the frustration and the feeling of loss, that people probably can relate to if they've experienced something like this. The feelings of darkness and how sweet that has become. That's powerful.
And it's not like this every day. You know what I mean?
There
are hard days, right? But especially as we get into the holidays or around his birthday or the anniversary date of his death, But for the most part, I feel that I have been given a double measure of this ability to share a hard message in a way that will change hearts. Yeah. And I feel that has been a blessing for me.
That is great. I'm so glad that it's so funny talking with people. It's so great that people go through hard things so that they can learn things to share with other people. So it's not like, I'm so glad that you experienced this, but I'm glad that you have figured out how to share it. That's powerful. So we haven't even talked about, what is the book called? So that people are on edge. People are on edge. Like, what is this thing called?
So the title of the book is called Learning to Breathe Again, Choosing to Heal After Losing a Loved One to Suicide.
Okay. And we will definitely have a link. Is there a better place to find that? Do you have it for sale on your website or through Amazon?
Yep.
Or
it's on Amazon, but you can also find it through my website, larkdeangalley.com. And on the website, you can also find a resource tab, because as I'm sharing, suicide awareness, prevention, all of these things that I would go and tell, parents would say to me, that's great. I'm aware. I want to prevent. What do I do? And so I started putting resources on a tab there.
Yeah, that's awesome. Because, you'll get the things as you read through the book, but to have specific things like we've talked about today, that is powerful. That is great. So the time that we have slated is not quite up, but I feel like this has been such a powerful and productive conversation and insight into a painful situation that has yielded and hopefully will continue to yield positive results. Is there a message? Is there something that people, maybe just the basics, the very prime idea, what is it that people need to know?
I would say the overall message is that love is the answer. I mean, as simple as that is, it really is the most important thing as we reach out in our relationships. Just show love. You are not responsible for this person to become a molded person the way you want them to be.
Yeah.
Love them for who they are. That the relationship is more important than them becoming who you think they need to be.
Wow. Yeah. That is great. And there's so much more to it than that, like we've talked about, listening and spending time.
And you know what? We are all so busy. I think especially parents right now with kids at home that they're trying to homeschool or they're trying to do their work from home. Life has gotten crazy. You need to strip away those things that really do not matter. And hopefully COVID has taught us some lessons. Strip those things away, remove the busyness, and connect and relate to your loved ones.
Yeah. Yeah. I've thought about that often. Do they really need to have, and you could fill in the blank with anything, do they really need to have guitar lessons and soccer practice and be on the football team? And like, those things are important. They do have value. But if they're taking us away from, we're trying to provide those happiness experiences for our kids, but is it really happiness? Or can we cut some of those things out and really get to know who they are and what they want out of life?
Exactly. Exactly.
Yeah.
I had a conversation with a neighbor just 2 days ago, and I had the opportunity to talk with her 12-year-old daughter the prior month. And her daughter knows who I am, but her daughter had never really talked to me. So we were together in this room, and the daughter, we're alone, and the daughter just started talking to me, like bearing her soul, and telling me the struggles she was having with her mother, who was my friend.
Yeah.
And I knew that the mother was also having struggles with the daughter because we had talked. And through it all, what the daughter was saying without saying it was, I want my mother to see me. I want my mother to hear me. That's what our kids are saying to us. When all of the frustration and the busyness and the mess, and they're not doing what we want them to do, that's what they're saying.
Yeah.
I want you to see me. I want you to hear me.
Yeah. And that's different for every kid. I mean, the idea is the same, but what they're saying and what they're sharing. Yeah. Anything else that you would like to share about your book, about your experience, about your speaking engagements?
Oh, you know what? I am just available to talk about this. I've dedicated my life to it now. It's so important to me to bring suicide prevention, to talk about, everyone has a mission. You have something important inside of you, and you need to stick around so that you can share whatever it is. And maybe right now you don't know what it is, but it's going to come out, just like you do these podcasts and you interact with kids. That is saving lives because you're changing people's paradigms.
Yeah. Well, Lark, I appreciate you reaching out to me, and I'm so glad that we were able to have this conversation, because I think a lot of people do have some hesitation, some fear. I know this is emotional. I don't know if this is going to be what I need right now, but if we have families, which we all do, if we have people that we care about, which hopefully we all do, we do need to spend time with them, and we do need to let them know that we see them and we hear them and that we care about them.
Right. Because at the end of the day, honestly, that's really all that matters, is those relationships.
Yeah. Thank you, Lark, for being with me today on the Own Your Good podcast. For those that are listening, I will have some links to some resources. I'll have a link to Lark's website and to her book, and hopefully this is something that you can incorporate into your life, into your family now, and sort of change how we view our children, how we view our families, and show them that we really do care about them and love them. And if you know somebody that needs this, I think my mission and Lark's mission in this regard are identical. We want to help people find happiness and joy and peace, and there's a lot of different ways that can happen. So share this with somebody. Share it with your spouse, share it with the people that need to hear how to better take care of their family and show them that they love them. Thank you, Lark, so much. I hope you have a great holiday season with your family and continued success. And I think awesome power and motivation as you share this with people. It's been fantastic. Thank you.
Thanks, David.
Thank you for joining me today on Own Your Good. I'd like to give a special thanks to Arches Audio. They are the ones that provided this awesome music. If you need anything for a project, I would go and check them out. They have a great selection of music and other services to help you with your creative projects. I hope that you found this valuable. If you enjoyed this episode and it did something for you, or you think somebody might benefit from it, please share this. It would mean a lot to me to help spread this positivity and this idea that people can change, improve, and ultimately own their good.